Hi everyone. Today I have Cindy Drummond to connect with me here on this podcast or video if you are watching on YouTube. So I'm really excited. She's all the way from Calgary, Canada. So welcome, Cindy.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, so little introduction. So Cindy is a author. Her book is called Reflection from the Dating Pool, and she had a very interesting story to tell us regarding the book. And she has a fascinating story, and obviously a truly empowered woman. So she's also the co-host of a Sunday Zoom gathering, and I love it. She's all WOW. So because this gathering is word of wisdom, and she also run this really amazing weekend gathering or retreat, whatever you want to call it, for women, called Women's Only Weekend, which I would love to attend, but obviously it's in Canada and we're in lockdown in Sydney. So I can only dream. But what I found is so amazing and why I really want to talk to Cindy today is that she obviously have gone through some things in her life. Um, but she managed to really come out strong and now running these events that, I feel we are very needed to connect with other women, to empower each other, to listen to each other's stories. So I'm really excited to interview her today, and I hope her story and wisdom and advice can also help our listeners. So, wow, welcome to my show.
Thank you.
So, first of all, for those that don't know, actually now I'm recording during the mid morning in Sydney, Australia, but it's 7 p.m., like evening time for Cindy, but she's still enjoying daylight. So, we are very, very envious here because it's pretty cold. Um, so, I think, first of all, I really want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background story, so to speak, like that lead you to write your book Reflection from the Dating Pool. So yeah, tell us a bit more about it.
Thank you. Well, so where do I start? I guess I didn't plan on writing a book. I always sort of thought about writing stories that was interesting to me, but I didn't have a topic to write about. I was just living my life, busy raising my children in my 30s and early 40s, and then I went through, like many people, I went through a traumatic time in my life, and even then, I didn't know I was writing a book. I was just trying to get myself through the experience. But as I was doing that, I was making notes and I was journaling. And as I was talking about my story and going through it, people kept saying, "Oh my goodness, like this would be a really good book." And so at some point after I'd gone through everything, I realized that maybe there was something for me to tell people and a story to share. So that's how the book came about. um, we won't give too many spoiler alerts, but my story, again, maybe not different than many people. I had left a marriage and I entered into another relationship, and it was about a 5 to 6 year relationship. And it ended abruptly one morning when six police officers came into our house and took the fellow who I was living with away in front of me and my daughters, in handcuffs. And I knew at that moment I needed to start over. And so within 24 hours, I had moved into my parents' basement, rock bottom. And I knew that people were worried about me. I was worried about me. And that propelled me, I think also being a mom and having these two girls, that propelled me to set a new course of action for myself, because I knew they were watching me and I knew what I did next was going to be very important.
Yeah, so that was really the beginning of this new chapter, isn't it? Because I have read the beginning of the book when, where it sounds like suddenly, like from a happy, normal Monday, shattered into something, completely different. And you know what I was thinking when I was reading it is that, as a mother myself, my daughter is only 4 and I have a son who is just 1. But I imagine I'm a Leo and I felt I'm a Lioness when it comes to protecting my children, because obviously there's a million things go through your head, like related to your relationship, about the man you're with. But it's always about our children because we want to model for them, we want to protect them. So your instinct will be what I'm going to do next and how I'm going to react and respond to this situation, which I think it's so helpful to think about, retrospectively. It's all about how we respond to this. And the more we know ourselves and more resilient we become, or more empowered we become, like how you come out this tunnel, that we actually are better in terms of how do we respond to this kind of threatening situation. But so going back to that topic about, what I also want to share with you is that, this person for 6 years and then suddenly this happened. You was, you know, surprised that, you see him 1 minute in pajamas, next minute in handcuffs. But were there signs before that you think, "Oh, I wish I would have paid more attention to it"? Because the reason why I'm asking you is that I also had a very dysfunctional relationship about 2 years. And when it finally ended, not as abruptly, but pretty much, it was just kind of me discovering, he hasn't been, truthful to me and so forth. But retrospectively, there were signs and red flags. I mean, what do you think about that now?
For sure, in the beginning, I did, because you have so many questions, and when you're in something, when you're deeply involved in something day to day, you don't have the ability to step back and see it from an outsider's perspective.
Mm,
So yes, there were signs. There was those whispers in your gut that you knew something wasn't adding up, but you also didn't want to put a name on it because you didn't know for sure. So you start this cycle of doubting yourself, and you start this cycle of, you're not trusting, but then any answer will placate you and make you think, okay, right, like I'm probably wrong, because when you're with somebody who is good at lying, it is
mm,
good at pulling
mm.
the wool over other people's eyes, you start becoming the person who's crazy. And so you start really doubting yourself. And it's not until they're arrested in handcuffs and you're removed from the situation, or they're removed from the situation, that you're just like, oh, I wasn't crazy. I just didn't trust myself.
Yeah, and I have the same thing. Like, even to an extent that I saw something, text message I probably wasn't meant to see. And I was like, what's this about? And the response was, how could you peep at my things? And I be being accused. The response often was that they defend and attack, saying, with all the red flags, if we voice the red flag, immediately we're being asked that you should trust me, or what's that behavior? And then you self-doubt, right? Women often are very intuitive, but at the same time we try not to necessarily point out these things. So we took a step back. But anyway, fast forward. So obviously you put your life back together. And then what was really interesting is you have this sort of experiment where you're going on 50 dates in a year or something, and then, see what happens. Because I also relate that there was a period of time that I felt I was dating a lot of people because, you came out from a bad relationship and, I want to move on, right? And then there was also a period of time that I just decided this is a deep freeze. It's a winter for me. I'm just not with anybody for a long time. And it actually taught me a lot of things. So tell us about your dating experience.
And that's a really good way of putting it. So we know that I didn't start dating immediately. I first made sure my children were safe, and made sure that everybody, I was moving my life forward without the dating piece, and developing friendships with lots of other women and sort of finding my tribe. And then when I had the confidence from that, that's when I decided, okay, I knew I wasn't ready. There's maybe you're not ready to date, but I knew that if I wintered, using your expression, if I wintered too long, then maybe I would never want to date again. Or
Mm,
maybe I would be too scared to date again. So I kind of wasn't ready, but I was sort of ready. And that's why I said, okay, 50 dates. I'm going to go on 50 dates because that will give me the time I need to also heal myself.
It's amazing. Like people was like often very like cold feet, maybe try one or two, and then Cindy go like, I don't do it. I'm gonna commit to 50 just to test this theory out. I love it. So tell us a bit more about that experience, what that taught you, what you have learned from it, and perhaps probably I'm compounding too much this question, but what other people could learn from you if they're really scared?
Well, one is I can relate to that. I was very scared.
Mm,
Um, I drove to my very first date with tears streaming down my face. I was
mm,
so frightened and I was so scared about trusting again. But what I learned through the journey and by doing it is, there and there's a few, like I started giving myself words of wisdom when I was journaling. Like if
mm,
I went away on a date and somebody only talked about themselves, then I would come back and I would remind myself, okay, so make sure that when you're showing up to meet these people, that you are being interested, that you are taking the time to get to know them as well. It's
mm,
not just show and tell who I am and why I'm so great. It's also about learning how to listen, be an active listener. And some of the other things that I learned is that I wanted to make sure that I didn't trifle with anyone's feelings. You
mm.
don't know the other person what they're experiencing when they not everybody is scared to date, but I'm sure that men are also putting themselves out there. So I would try to be respectful of what their feelings were. I didn't want to hurt anybody unnecessarily, but I also had boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
It's a compounded answer as well as your question, because it's there's a lot. And that's why I think the journaling piece, again, you're writing down how you're feeling in the moment, but then you can reflect back and see, okay, how did I show up that day and how did they show up? Would I have reacted different if I'd had a better day at work? So there's all those things that are going on.
Well, Cindy, you're truly a like top grade A student in the universe eyes, because you take all these 50 days into 50 learning lessons. Because this guy talking too much about himself, you write down as in not like judging that's the fact, but more like what can I learn from it each time, right? And how am I going to show up with my next date? So 50, actually, instead of 50 dates, it's 50 learning lessons that you decided to take yourself through. And I'm sure like there's ups and downs, good and bad dates, right? Some turns out better, some was just ridiculous, I'm sure. And but when you have that attitude, as each of these are learning lessons or an encounter for a reason, like one word of wisdom, it's probably justified this occurrence. It just make you so much further on this path than where you start. And whether or not you actually, like for those people who are listening, maybe they're thinking, wow, maybe it's a number game, by 51 then I will meet someone. But even forget about that outcome. By detaching that outcome, just thinking how far you have gone, if you look back as your personal development or just personal healing, that's tremendous. So bravo to you, Cindy, type grade A student through and through. So maybe tell us one of the most remarkable or ridiculous or funniest date, like just to give those who are really scared on the sideline a little bit of a, oh, that could be cool.
Well, I do remember going out on one date, and you know what, we were chatting and we were talking about both of us where we were on our dating journey. And I remember the person saying to me, well, how do you handle it if you meet somebody and you know they're not your type? And I had an answer right away. I was like, well, like you can always need more golf partners or people to go bowling with or whatever it is. It doesn't always have to lead to romance. And he kind of nodded, and we finished our date. And then when we were leaving and walking out the door together, I said, well, that was great. And he said, yeah, we should go golfing sometime, which he immediately just put me into the friend zone. But you know what?
It's
Good for him.
okay. Yeah.
That is okay. There wasn't the going home and like wondering, or that I love that actually. It was just like, yeah, absolutely. We're in the friend zone. We can golf sometime.
Yeah, and that's go back to, I really feel that recently I do talk a lot about, whether it's my video or podcast, that when we're so attached to the outcome, sometimes we miss the bigger picture. Because can you imagine, just because you've done these 50 lessons, you are a very different person from the beginning. So the person you attract you, it's very different level. You will end up in a much different story. So that it's just, if you're so grasping that I should get somebody by the 10th date, and then you're kind of missing the whole point, isn't it? It's sometimes we definitely should take action. You got to leave the house. You got to, do what you feel inspired to do, but inspired to do, rather than, I'm going to just do this 10 dates or 20, 50 dates, tick the boxes, and then bam, I want this outcome. I think that pushing, that forcing is not, doesn't usually yield the best outcome. And I think having that attitude demonstrated with that date, it's so cool, because you don't know, maybe through this friend, you met his friend and so forth. And sometimes we also need good friends, frank and genuine. And he was very genuine in terms of asking you that question. So that's fantastic.
I thought it was fantastic. And again, just some of the things that you said really resonate, because imagine if I drive to my first date crying. I'm obviously not ready for a relationship. So I wasn't showing up as the best version of myself for those first few dates as I was figuring out. So if you're willing to do the work on yourself while you're learning how to date, you'll be the best version of yourself possible through experience and through practice.
Mm. For sure. And so before I have a ton of questions to ask, but before we move on to next, I want to ask, what would you say to someone who may have a horrible story or still healing, not sure they're ready? What would you say to this friend, this girlfriend of yours, to, maybe take a leap of faith, or how do you approach it slightly differently?
I was thinking a lot about that, and I think the first words of wisdom or the advice that I would give is you don't have to wait till you're completely ready or healed.
Mm,
You just need to, it's like have when you're training for a sport and you hurt yourself, you obviously you go to physio and you do all those things, but you slowly venture back into the sport because you know that what you want to attain at the end, right?
mm,
So you do maybe start before you're completely ready, and you be kind to yourself, and you know that you're practicing and you're
mm.
getting stronger and you're getting better.
Yeah, I really like that. So moving on to the next part, um, from having all this experience to writing the book is another leap of faith, right? I'm sure a lot of listeners here have the stories, have the experience, and it's for me, having written a couple of things, I think in some way it's very therapeutic, it's very healing. And if you know what you're writing and sharing is going to help other people, you also feel you're doing something meaningful. So, what's your experience, and why did you take that leap of faith, and the overall what you have learned from publishing this book?
Oh, you touched on some of those as well. So when I wrote the book, I didn't have any expectations. I knew I needed to write the story for myself. And if not one person was interested in reading my book, that was okay, because I was the audience I was writing for. As it turns out, my story did resonate with people. And I knew this before, and I know this even more clearly now. We all have a story to share. Not everybody needs to grab a pen and paper or pull out their computer, but I think through sharing, again, there's wisdom and learning. And so I think that if people, as a society, we are getting better at sharing our stories. But I think that if you don't want to write a book, but you want to go join a storytelling group, or you want to even go into like counseling group sessions where you can be talking about what you went through, because everybody has something to share, and everybody has words of wisdom that they can pass on to other people. We think that we are so unique, and yet we share so much common experience.
Mm. Yeah, and everyone has a different way to articulate or to look at their story as well. I remember this author, Christian Northrup, in her book Making Life Easy, she shared one particular technique about emotions. I hope I recall this part correctly, that people will be sitting in a circle and they will talk about the story or whatever they're holding a strong emotional attachment or reaction to it. And then people who are listening, I think the left of that person will talk about what kind of emotion the story brings out. So the person in like who telling us just told a story, person to the left of that person would say, I hear, say, sadness or anger or frustration. Then to the right, the person say, well, what the person needs, whether it's time to heal or time to cry, opportunity to release, I don't know. So, but they are giving, I mean, nobody is saying this is correct or wrong. It's more about asking other people to share the perspective about, based on the story, what they could hear in terms of what kind of emotion came up, what kind of need this woman need, that she may not know herself, because she may know I'm angry, but she may not know I'm jealous, or she may know I need to heal, but she may not know she needs time and permission. I thought that was really interesting, because when you talk about that, I think that brings opportunity and a space for women to do that, right? When you share stories. So you're smiling.
Well, because again, at the time when I was creating my women only weekend, I didn't purposely set out to achieve that, but that's what it became. It became a community of women that could gather and share stories and learn and empower themselves. So I do think, and you know, one of my favorite books is Anita Diamond's The Red Tent. And it is all about from a, it's not a religious book, but it is because it talks about, you know, the women back in the time of Jesus, and they'd all go into the red tent at a certain time of month, and you know they would tell stories and they would take care of each other, and I feel that we've lost some of that. So any opportunities where we can come together as women and share, I think is amazing.
That's exactly it. So that's what's perfect, because I want to ask you about, obviously the listeners or viewers here may not be in Calgary, Canada, so they may not be able to join those weekends, which I love this kind of women gathering, because I think when women gather, magics happen. Whether you're sharing story or you sharing tools and techniques, it's about empowering each other and spending time for ourselves, which we rarely do now, because it's all about looking after everybody or chasing a career. But sometimes we kind of need to step back, go back to who we are, what we need first before we go power out. So a lot of people may not be able to join you on the weekend, but you have the Word of Wisdom Sunday gathering on Zoom coming back in September. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So that came truly out of being in a pandemic. Shortly after the first lockdowns in April of 2020, I realized that I was missing connection. And so I asked a friend if she would be interested in doing these Sunday weekly 1 hour meetings. And of course, she was very interested. So every Sunday from 10 a.m. in Canada to 11 a.m., we would have small groups, but sometimes people from all over the world, and we would have a presenter. So we would do a little bit of grounding, a little bit of gratitude, like maybe writing a gratitude letter, and then just have a speaker talk about something. And honestly, it could have been anything from meditation, but it could have also been finance or anything. And it just was that hour to bring us together and to be looking at each other through a screen, I guess, but just again that bond that gave us a place to share. And so many of the participants were there every Sunday, and
Mm,
that was their like, okay, I'm a busy mom, but Sundays at 10 o'clock I just grab my coffee and I sit down. Or you know, some ladies were joining from England, and so it was the end of their day, and they were just getting, that was how they were finishing their day, with a little bit of grounding and gratitude. And it just was this beautiful 1 hour. That's all we needed to connect.
yeah. So for those who are listening and interested to maybe grab your coffee on a Monday, if you're in the right time zone, or a cup of tea at the end of the day, if you're on the opposite spectrum time zone, so you can check out obviously Cindy's website, which we're going to show on the show notes later, and also I'm going to ask. But before we wrapped up, I really want to ask you, so after doing the book and all this gathering and all this event with women, what do you see that, things that you see that we all really need, but may not be giving ourselves enough? Or what do you see that could be something that we should be reminded of as a group of women, since you have been listening to all the stories and having all this time with people?
That's a really good question. I think that again, we all are having these different experiences with what's been going on in the world, but I think that so there's been a lot of fear for some people. So I do think that um, take a chance if you're feeling lonely and isolated, reach out to at least one person or a group, or find a support system online like Words of Wisdom, or go to an event, even if it's an outdoor event in your community that you can attend with other women. Like, look for those opportunities, because I do know personally a lot of women that feel more lonely than ever right
Mm.
now, and that breaks my heart.
Because the pandemic, like for example, I don't know how it was in Canada, but at the moment we have sort of the second round of lockdown this year, and Sydney in particular, we are like a couple of months. We have halfway through, I think. And I was reading up this single bubble, they call it. So if you live alone, and also within depends with district, because there are certain area you can only have another visitor within that area. But this single bubble thing really makes me think that, can you imagine under lockdown, you work from home, if you manage to work at all, and you are so alone? That's a really challenging time, because women love to be together and share and connect. And this is the time really testing our endurance and testing our courage to do things that will help us. So this is like, like you said, like fear and feeling lonely. It's one of the biggest thing. And I think there are things that people can try out to see whether for themselves. Maybe some people really, will enjoy online dating, or, joining internet groups, but they won't know unless they try, right?
Exactly. And I think you're right. Like, this maybe is a good time to dabble in online dating, or, find, maybe there's an online speed dating group, or maybe there's, even if it's not, dating, but, look for online book clubs, or just do something so
Hmm.
that you're not, if you are working, that's awesome, but you can't just be working and on social media all day. You need to find ways to connect.
Yeah. And I think the topic of starting over is also a really big one for a lot of women, because, could be a new job, could be a new relationship, or could be coming out from pandemic. The theme, the recurring theme of starting over. And it takes a lot of courage to actually do it rather than stay in the deep freeze, the winter. Because when we choose to stay in the winter, it felt like we're not starting over. Because starting over is so scary to so many people. They rather just stay in the deep freeze. So, and a lot about starting over. You have done a few. What would you say to your younger self, that if you're about to start over, what would you say to that person?
Well, I guess when you say my younger self, because I have two daughters who now are 25 and 22, so I was encouraging them during, a year and a half of lockdowns on and off, and just saying, I actually, I'm going to use the words of wisdom from my youngest, because she was going to school full time. So again, she's in school in her room, her job's in her room, she's exercising in the house, and she said, I need to come out of this pandemic with a passion. And
Mm.
so she took up snowboarding, which was something that we were still allowed to do. We just finished winter. So she was able to go snowboarding, and she was still able to do, so she was looking for things that she could become passionate about. I guess making lemonade out of lemons, when because it is scary. But
Mm.
imagine being 21 years old and your life is completely shut down. You're not
Mm.
going out to see your friends. You're not at school. And so I think she's a bit of an inspiration. You know, she doesn't have maybe the baggage that some of us might have at an older age, but she was living her best life, and that
I'm
was
pretty
a
sure
wonderful
she
thing.
learned from example. I mean, the way you talk about your 50 dates, we're like, I just went for 50 lessons. Um, because some people will beat themselves up and say, oh, I went for 48 and see what I got another. But I found it really interesting when you mentioned your daughter that, again, turning this into something to reflect within ourselves, because she wanted to come out of this with something like, and I think it's really inspirational because we can all dwell in this. We can, go crazy on online shopping or video games or all that kind of stuff, addicted to being another reality because we don't like this one, right? But she turned into, let me figure out what is my next project or my passion so I can do it and channel this locked up energy. And that's really really great. And our passion may change. Maybe a couple of years snowboarding is not necessarily going to be her profession, but she may be interested in, I don't know, water skiing in the summer, right? So,
Mhm.
but make, as you said, lemonade out of it. It's a really useful thing. And rather than turn into, dwelling into this spiral of doing horrible things, like I do think watching too much Netflix or on too much online shopping, or finish your video games and it's not necessarily the best way to get through. I mean, I think people would need some of that, but be mindful how much of it consumes you. Like, why don't you consume it, how much it consumes you?
And I think that's totally fine if you want to spend a weekend watching Netflix. But again, be be present and mindful that that's what you're choosing to do that day. So make sure that if it's a Netflix day, that's your choice, right? And if it's okay, and that's okay if it is your choice. But maybe then the next day, maybe it's, and again, it's so hard when you don't know what all the rules are everywhere around the world, but you know, 5 sit-ups, or like jogging in the, like, whatever it is, just be kind to yourself, but always know that you have choices to make, and those choices are okay.
Or could be watching any video or podcast like this to get you more uplifted, because you may consume half an hour of this interview, but if the next thing you may want to do is to sign up for online dating or sign up for online gathering group or go and see what kind of outdoor sport you can try, like, then the choice is also up to you. So what you consume also matter, because it could inspire you to do something more positive. But anyway, I love this interview and I thank you so much for joining me today. And so for people who want to connect with you, say maybe join your online gathering, or if they in the area, they can come to your weekend when they resume, or buy your book. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
I think the place that points them to all of that is my website, cindydrummond.ca. You can buy my books off Amazon. You can register for the next Words of Wisdom, which will start in September. Send me an email. Tell me your story. Ask me your advice. I do think that I'm always open to support and hear other people's stories.
Thank you so much. And I will put the link of your website on the show notes. And obviously we're going to share this on social media, and you can obviously follow and connect with Cindy there. So thank you so much for this time together. And I'm so excited for you, like, because you guys now can do things. So thank you so much.
Thank you.